This video is part of my series on CA technologies and digital transformation. And in this video, we are talking about the very important topic of security. So when we think about security, we are ultimately concerned with providing access in a secure manner for a range of individuals. So these could be customers, employees, partners, administrators, or there could even be things. We might be providing access to things in the IoT space. Uh, and in terms of providing access to what? Well, it could be any asset. It could be an as a service platform that we have, either in-house, private, or on a public cloud. It could be assets that are back office IT estates, or back office IT assets, or data assets. Or it could be assets that reside in a data center. But ultimately, we are providing access for individuals or things to these assets and through a number of channels. So it could be through APIs, it could be through web portals, or it could be through mobile applications. So one of the first areas of capability that CA brings here is through the Identity Suite. Now, the Identity Suite is ultimately concerned with managing access for large user populations. It's concerned with automating and enforcing policies, ensuring adherence to compliance with these policies, and also improving workforce productivity. Because if you think about compliance with security policies, there tends to be a lot of manual overhead. So if we can automate that overhead, we free up employees to focus on other areas, whilst at the same time ensuring compliance through an automated and auditable process. So this screenshot shows the CA portal, and the portal is something that unifies the user experience across the management and governance functions. So the idea is that all of the user's identity information and capabilities are available in a one-stop shop. And the user interface is obviously simple, it's intuitive, so this is something that helps user productivity. So this is one of the kind of USPs for CA Identity Suite, providing the end user community with a friendly, intuitive channel to security requirements. CA's Identity Suite has been long recognized as an industry leader in its space and a bit of a standard. It's used by many of the top organizations around the world. Again, the sort of unique selling point for CA Identity Suite is it manages to combine the somewhat disparate requirements from two communities of stakeholders in security. So on the one hand, you have your IT security people who are focused on strong security, strong encryption, strong authentication, etc. And on the other hand, you've got your business stakeholders who are, well, yes, they are interested in security, but not if it means impacting the user experience. So they are also focused on low friction security mechanisms. And this is a benefit of the Identity Suite. It manages to address both sets of disparate requirements through a single solution. In terms of architecture overview, this is a very sort of high level overview of the architecture behind Identity Suite. But ultimately, on the top, you've got the user experience, which is something that is presented to the end user, allows access control, request access to systems, etc. We've got the identity manager, which is about automated provisioning and policy and workflow management. And we have identity governance capabilities. So think about compliance with security regulations. You first need to assess who has got access to what systems. Do we have any dormant accounts which need cleaning up? And how do we undertake a policy or a privilege cleanup exercise? On the right-hand side, Express Technologies basically offers a range of off-the-shelf pre-configured solutions to get your identity management functions up and running. Another area of capability within CA Security Suite is the CA Directory. So if you think about LDAP protocol, there are many different directories that support the LDAP protocol, and CA's directory is one. I'm not going to dwell on this during this video, but essentially CA's directory is something that is designed to shave milliseconds off directory access protocol requests. So milliseconds saved per request kind of the cumulative effect of that adds up to real world performance differences if you've got lots of LDAP activity going on. Advanced authentication. So when we think about advanced authentication, we tend to think about two-factor authentication. But advanced authentication is more than just two-factor authentication. So, I mean, the three primary business drivers for strong authentication are security. Obviously, firstly, that's where the need comes from. We want something that enhances security to address things like online identity fraud issues, but we also want convenience, something that is easy to use for end users. And obviously we need to keep an eye on costs. So nobody wants a solution that is going to cost a fortune to implement and to operate going forwards. Now this slide I include as just a reference to a survey that was done by Gartner on US bank customers. And this was in the wake of new regulation that was brought out in the US some time ago in response to some security issues. Now, basically, the regulation imposed strong authentication requirements for banks. Now, Gartner took a survey at the time of banking customers, and the survey revealed that 12% of customers had considered changing banks as a result of the strong authentication controls that were put in place. They found these controls to be too onerous. And in fact, 3% of customers actually did change banks. So the lesson learned here was that, yes, authentication is obviously important, but security ultimately is something that should support the business, not damage the business. So if your security is done somewhat carelessly in the interest of strong security, you do risk losing custom. So what ideally we want is something that can, when it comes to authentication, we want a solution that allows us to authenticate users in a strong manner, but do so without impacting the user experience unnecessarily. So introducing CA Advanced Authentication. So this consists of two best of breed components. We have CA Risk Authentication, which provides real-time and transparent risk evaluation based on things like user behavior, device characteristics, and location data. And we also have CA Strong Authentication, which provides a variety of software-based two-factor authentication capabilities. So together, they enable an intelligent, layered security approach to protect user identities and organizational data. So when it comes to risk data, there are a number of attributes that we can look at. So user behavior profiling is one capability, and this is a differentiator for our CA Advanced Authentication. So this self-learning model assesses risk based on each individual user's behavior patterns. The model can start to provide results after the second authentication, and with each subsequent login, the model builds a better and more accurate picture of the user's behavior. And this is considered intelligent security because the patterns for normal are based on the individual user. So Tom's patterns are different from Mary's patterns, who are different from Fred's. What is normal for one person is not normal for another. So this individual context makes it harder to spoof by a fraudster. In addition, the user experience is simple because the user does not need to learn anything. They log in and they use your application. The system collects the data it needs to build the model transparently, and the user is only challenged in the event that their behavior deviates from the normal. For example, John logs in from the same laptop, same New York City location at the same time every day for the past 6 months, and all of a sudden John must fly to London for a customer meeting. When he logs in from his London hotel, the system recognizes that this is out of pattern form and therefore challenges him for additional authentication credentials. So, John is not shocked or surprised by this. In fact, he's probably glad that the system recognized that he is doing something different. So this is intuitive. We also talk about device DNA, such as we can profile a device that a user commonly uses and identify if, for example, I make my authentication request typically from an iPhone and all of a sudden I make a request from an Android device. Again, that can be flagged. Now, the mobile devices, or the use of mobile devices in the application economy, changed the art of the possible when it comes to authentication. So we can use mobile devices as an authentication device itself. So we've got a CA, it's got a mobile application platform which generates one-time passwords. We can also support identifying or authenticating to the device. So if you're relying on the device authentication procedure, such as the fingerprint scanner, we have got a platform that can enhance this authentication with mobile risk. We also have solutions that can use the mobile as an authentication device, so authenticating through the mobile to some system. So use the mobile's biometric authentication capabilities as part of an authentication to your end system. Now, another area that has seen a lot of interest recently in the security circles is the notion of insider attacks and privileged insider attacks. This gentleman probably did more than anybody else on the planet to raise the profile of these kind of attacks. So this, of course, was an NSA contractor who had admin level privileges to very sensitive systems, and we all know the story about what Mr. Snowden did with that access. Now, that unfortunately is not an isolated incident. If you do your research, there are a wide range of fascinating stories, including this one. A contractor or an employee of Fannie Mae who managed mortgages for the US market. This was a disgruntled employee who decided that he would plant what was called a software time bomb, something that was intended to activate after he had been dismissed. Now, had that software time bomb been successful, he would have wiped out data from Fannie Mae's IT systems across the board, which would have in turn had devastating consequences for the whole US economy. Now, thankfully, his script was found and disabled before it had the opportunity to activate. But these are examples of the notion of insider attack, and it's something that is becoming more prevalent among CSOs, I think largely due to the fact that we are seeing adoption of cloud-based solutions. And obviously they come with a bit of a security concern. If I outsource my sensitive things to the cloud, how do I know who is managing them on my behalf? How do I know that I'm not going to be the next front page news when we suffer an intended breach or even an accidental breach? So the CA Privileged Access Manager solution is something that addresses these specific concerns around insider attacks, whether accidental or malicious. So the capabilities here are around strong authentication for those privileged users. It's around credential management and credential rotation. It's about ensuring that we have least privilege, role-based access control. We've got standard features like command filtering, whitelist, blacklist filtering, and crucially session recording. So the ability to attribute any actions back to an individual user and to have evidence for any activities that were undertaken by that administrator. It's also worth mentioning that the notion of session recording is not just a reactive measure, but it's actually a preventative measure. So obviously for a malicious insider intending to misbehave, their actions are going to be different if they are aware that their session is being recorded. So the Privileged Access Manager solution is available as a standalone hardware appliance or a virtual appliance, so it can be used in cloud-based environments as well. Obviously the benefits here are around stopping targeted attacks, ensuring compliance, mitigating insider threats ultimately. So there are two sort of areas of capability. You've got the standard network-based security, and this includes the capabilities around command filtering, password rotation, session recording, a very scalable session recording capability, by the way. And also low-level controls. So think about think about server-level controls for operating system level and application level access control. So we've got capabilities to very low-level agent-based kernel-level protection for files, folders, registries, ports, that kind of thing. So a holistic solution for addressing the concern around insider attacks. Now, I mentioned API management here, even though this is referenced in a separate dedicated video, but obviously one of the benefits of API management is around security, but please do refer to the API management video for more information. And single sign-on, SSO, this was formerly known as SiteMinder, and it is widely used around the world. In the UK, BT use our SSO solution as an industry standard. It's used by many other big name brands to provide SSO capabilities. It supports a range of architectures. For example, you can use agent-based policy enforcement points or centralized gateway enforcement points. This supports today's standards, including SAML, OAuth, OpenID, and the WS Federation.